Now, managing IT-enabled workflow. Workflow deals with the automation of business processes. What we need to do is we need to understand the various routes of a particular workflow. If we're in customer service, if we're in returns, if we are in operations and distribution, what we want to understand is what the particular flow is. We want to coordinate and communicate those flows and then use the system to enable the workflow to work properly. A great example of this would be content management, where you have creators of content put items into the content management system. Once that's done, then a set of workflows are created such that it will move that digital content from one place to the other place, and therefore people can approve, disapprove, send it back. These types of systems are kind of a group support system because they manage the workflow between them, but they also will allow at certain times people to agree on which image to use or which picture to use or which content to use. So we can put them all together and create this mechanism to allow us to manage from the inception of a product all the way to final delivery. We also find that IT can support negotiation, both cooperative and dialectic processes. In many of the systems that we have, we can use simple tools to use voting, which could be considered a form of negotiation, assuming everybody came to a consensus. But we can also create separate subgroups, we can create separate threads, we can create private messages to enable negotiation to occur, which is much more difficult to occur if you are not communicating and you are in different locations. It's important here to understand that the communication is what supports the negotiation. How the communication occurs may be relevant, but in the absence of communication, no negotiation can occur. So negotiation support systems help reduce discord and increase the chance of consensus. Now notice, it doesn't guarantee consensus. And it's not to say that negotiations don't occur better face-to-face than they do online. However, it does increase the amount of communication that's there, and it may also provide another outlet for easier negotiations where one party doesn't appear to dominate the other party. Managing crisis and emergency response. This is another key one, and we've seen, especially after Hurricane Sandy and some other natural disasters, that these information systems can help us communicate information. They can help solidify the perception of things that are going on, valuable possible loss, probability of loss, time pressures. They can also have the effect, it also has an effect on cognition, where loss of memory, abstractability, reduced attention span across space and time. When emergencies occur, a lot of disinformation occurs, and IT systems can help manage the information. So some other tools that enable us to manage crises and emergency response are things like Twitter and Facebook. We found in Hurricane Sandy, we saw a lot of Facebook posts, especially on Long Island. One of the things that we saw was a lot of people using Facebook to find out where gas was, who was getting a shipment of gas, who was online, when did they get the last shipment. Now this was more of an ad hoc type of thing. However, I know in certain towns, the city of Long Beach, for example, they actually used Facebook to actually disseminate information. Much of the infrastructure was down. However, people were able to get some signal on their mobile devices, and they were able to get information from Facebook. And it was easy for them to know because it could be disseminated from person to person to person. So once you found who was giving you the information and you trusted that source, you were able to act upon that source or go to another source that had more accurate information. Technology and infrastructure for organizational readiness is another one. We find that the governments, both state and federal governments, are using these EMRSs, emergency response management systems, to manage that information flow and coordinate activity. And this would include being able to coordinate the activities of various suppliers. For example, suppliers of water, suppliers of food, suppliers of clothing. We find that some of the nonprofits are doing the same thing as well, where they're allowing not only the collection of monies for donations immediately after an emergency, but using the same tools to actually work with suppliers to move the products or move the supplies where they are needed effectively. Motivating a workforce that's operating virtual is a fairly difficult thing because nobody is being paid. There are no incentives per se. However, there are two types of incentives. One is the explicit incentives, such as rewards or payments, and even to another degree recognition, and the intrinsic rewards, which are things like it makes me feel good, or I feel like I'm helping the community, and I want to do more for other people, or I just enjoy doing it. So the intrinsic rewards usually are significant in terms of open source involvement. However, things like recognition are also important for other individuals, especially if they want the notoriety. So some of the motivators that are both extrinsic and intrinsic, which are valuable in open source in the absence of payments, are reputation among peers, and that is an extrinsic one. Performance recognition, same thing. Pride in contributions, well, that's an intrinsic value. And technology efficacy is another intrinsic value. And that basically means that by me doing this, I feel more confident in my ability with that technology. So there are the two types of extrinsic and intrinsic rewards. Governance structures in virtual organizations, again, depends on the individual group. So in some cases we have a loose structure, in other cases we have a more strict or rigid structure. The self-governance principles include managed membership. Well, who is going to be allowed into the group? Rules and institutions. We may have contributors, authors, editors, and publishers, and then finally administrators. Well, those may be rules that are set up, and they have different capabilities for each. Monitoring, we're going to watch what everyone does, but we also want the entire community to monitor each other. And sanctions, when someone does something that they shouldn't, we're going to put some social pressure on them. These are types of controls. In this case, this is what's called a clan control, where the group basically says, we don't want you doing that anymore, this is not the way we do things, and your punishment might be expulsion from the group. The different formal controls would be more along the lines of, we explicitly state what our rules are, and there's an explicit punishment. In this case, this is more of a softer type of control, where the group kind of gently coerces via some sort of pressure via reputation. So collaboration is at the heart of business today. Every organization has some form of collaboration, either between departments, between suppliers, or between themselves and their customers. The IT advancements allow for these parallel organization structures. We can create flatter teams and use the tools to increase the overall interaction and problem solving and knowledge management. We want to look for, in the future, how do we take this to the next level? And that is going to include a significant amount of mobile technologies, things like the tablets or your mobile phones, things even like further like the Google Glasses, if you will, where information can be pumped in as well as recorded, and that information can be disseminated amongst a group. And what ends up happening is that the individuals begin to change the way they work. They change their behavioral patterns. That change in behavioral patterns could have both a positive or an adverse effect on overall productivity and efficacy. So that kind of concludes this module, Chapter 13. We'll see you for Chapter 14.